Rise of Hawk Part 2, Scene 28. Day 5. Nalana. Nalana smiled. It was a warm, sunny day. In the heavens above her, their biggest moon, Taina, sat in her full moon glory against that perfect sapphire sky. Nalana was boundlessly happy on such a beautiful winter's day. She loved the sunlight. More specifically, she needed sunlight, and the winters in Arana were particularly difficult for her. The flea market south of the docks was crowded with people and stalls. Brightly coloured materials flickered in the breeze above her. The smells of cooking meats permeated the air. Haggling voices called loudly over top of each other, and underneath the racket of the rabble, someone played a soulful melody on a flute. She pushed some of her loose brown hair behind one ear and grinned at the assortment of pretty jewellery in front of her. She only had the $20 bill she'd won last night, but she wanted to buy something small, something that wouldn't be eaten or broken, lost or even stolen. She wanted something that was just for her to hold on to and treasure as a permanent reminder of the life she would like to lead one day. Reaching one hand out, she touched a pretty blue gem that was set into a silver pendant. It was beautiful, but it was also $30, and therefore too much. For a moment, though, she allowed herself to imagine that she would buy it and wear it, keeping it safe next to her heart. If I had any money, I'd chip in for it, Nala. That'd look lovely on you. Nalana lifted her fingers from the cool gem and chuckled as she glanced sideways at Talon. It's okay. Someone would probably mug me if I had a rock like that around my neck. He laughed. Probably true. Looking around him at the people and noise, he frowned. Well, Nathan hasn't come back yet, so will you be okay shopping while I go trade with Diggs? I won't be long. She nodded. Sure. As he melted into the crowds of noise and motion, she heard his voice call out, I hope you get something good. I will, she yelled. Turning away from the expensive jewellery store, she entered the flow of people down the middle of the street. Ahead, a line of children chased each other between the crowds. They were laughing playfully and making a good show of being a bunch of innocent children playing in the street, but she knew better and turned away from them as they passed, so that the pickpocket at the end of the line couldn't take her precious $20 bill from her. Further along the narrow street were food stalls. Beyond, through the smoke and noise of cooking, she saw another table with jewellery and headed straight for it. The food smelt amazing as she walked past. On one stall, flatbreads were cooked on hot plates, folded up into a parcel and filled with various meats and salad. Another stall owner was cooking some kind of mincemeat into patties and making burgers. On the other side of the street, there was a huge display of different fruits and vegetables. Her stomach grumbled as she walked, and she told it that she would buy food once she'd found something special. The second jewellery store was filled with all sorts of junk jewellery made from plastic and painted up to look like metal. But in the centre of the table, locked in a small case, were some nice pendants on chains, and a few plain metal rings. The rings held no interest for her because they could be stolen or lost far too easily. Most of the pendants were too expensive, except for one that hung on a plaited leather cord. It was silver and cast into the shape of a sea moon jumping out of the water. Having been born on a coast the sea moon frequented, Nalana was very drawn to the pendant. It was a lovely, subtle reminder of home and only $10. She smiled excitedly at it through the glass. Please, can I have the moon pendant? She handed the bill over to the burly stall owner. He looked at her in confusion, and she remembered that in Rana they weren't called moon. Oh, sorry, the whale pendant. Sure. He handed her back some change and lifted up the metal case to unlock it. You want a bag? Nalana smiled politely and shook her head. No, thank you. As she moved away from the stall, she stared at it sitting in her hands. Tracing the shape of it with her thumb, she felt so happy to have something of her own that wasn't clothes or jewellery or cutlery. Lifting the leather cord over her neck, she let the pendant fall under her shirt out of sight. She walked back towards the food stalls with the intention of getting one of the stuffed flatbread meals, but didn't notice a tall, darkly dressed man step out of the crowd towards her. Only after handing over the last of her money and turning away, as she took a bite of the hot, yummy food, did she see the man and stop in her tracks. She knew his face, and he knew hers, but it wasn't a positive kind of knowing. Nalana yelped, dropping her food and turned tail. Her heart beat loudly in her chest as she ran. She could not allow him to get her. She had to somehow find Nathan or get out to the far edge of the markets to Talon. There were so many people to dodge around at the flea market, and the street was narrow. It made running at any speed dangerous, but she had to keep going, had to get away from Fritz. Dodging a group of children and a large clothes store, she caught her foot on something and found herself falling to the grubby street. The nearby children chortled and ran away. She tried to get up, but it was too late. Fritz had caught up with her. He pushed her down to the ground again and towered over her. She scrambled back, trying to get away from him, but her shoulders met wall and she was trapped. Nalana Yen, I don't suppose you have the money you owe me? His deep, rough voice mirrored the danger inherent in him. She tried to gather her strength and glared at him defiantly. I don't owe you anything, Fritz. I'm afraid that you do, and with an attitude like that, you're not going to like the payment terms. The broad-shouldered man grabbed her arm and roughly yanked her to her feet. Scene 29. Nalana, Talon called out, pushing his way through the oddly non-compliant crowd of people. Nalana, he called louder. A sudden hand on his chest stopped him. Don't. He turned and Nathan stood close as if he'd come out of nowhere. Why? We've got to get her back. Did you see who has her? Tay shrugged. A Spades, I know, but if we surprise him we can get her back. No. Look, there, to the right. The younger man pointed across the crowd to an alley entrance near the gangster, where a man stood in dark tailored suit and hat. And there, the alley on the other side of the street also had a dark suited gangster standing in it. That's not just any ordinary Spades gangster. That's Ayala Spades, or Fritz. A head-on conflict with him and his goons would be suicide. Talon's heart rate increased at the name of the well-known slaver, and he swallowed. Well, then, what do? We have to get her back. We can't let them... His voice trailed off and he looked away. It was unbearable to think about what happened to people once Fritz got a hold of them. Nathan's voice was oddly calm. We know where they're taking her. That means we can sneak in and get her back in more strategically desirable surroundings. Tay lifted an eyebrow. How is the inside of the Ace of Spades in any way strategically desirable? One corner of Nathan's mouth lifted, bringing that disconcerting amusement into the priest's face. Better a casino filled with gangsters than a public street crowded with collateral damage, surely. Talon sighed. Indeed. I'll call Nama to meet us there with the van. Scene break. Marcus's wrists bled, almost constantly, from the rough rope that tied him to the broken wall heater. He sighed and allowed his legs to drop him to the chipped lino floor. That held him for days, perhaps even weeks, in this tiny, windowless room, and all because he'd stopped them from taking a young woman. Now he was thousands of miles from his homeland and a prisoner of gangsters. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the agony in his wrists. Above him, the neon buzzed on and off in time with the light. The noise and flickering invaded his focus, making it impossible to block it out. He sighed again. At the other end of the long room, the door opened. He flinched, eyes opening and staring fearfully. Two gangsters came through the door, dragging a limp figure into the room. Riz, untie the scum. One of them let go of the figure and walked towards Marcus. Hands, demanded the grizzled gangster. Standing, Marcus pushed his arms forward, while at the same time trying to push his back further into the corner to get away from the gangster. Riz brought out a flick knife, and Marcus shrank from it. His arm was grabbed, and the man proceeded to cut the ropes. His wrists were suddenly free, and he had the bizarre urge to dance on the spot, but suppressed it. Scum, you're going to patch up this girl. You try to escape again, we hang you by your neck this time. Yes, sir, he mumbled. Marcus kept his gaze on the floor. He'd learned the first day not to look them in the eyes. He waited until the gangsters had left and the door locked behind them. Slowly he approached the bloody figure on the floor. Long, light brown hair covered her face in messy ringlets. One arm was bent oddly underneath her, and her rag clothes were ripped and bloody as if they'd cut her with a very small knife many times. A whimper sounded from under the mess of hair. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. "I'm Marcus." "No," a quiet but strong voice answered. "Leave me alone. I ain't sleeping with you. Anyone." He got down low on his hands and knees to be as non-threatening as possible. "No, I'm a prisoner too. I won't hurt you." "No," she said, her voice still quiet but stronger. "Don't touch me." Sitting back on his bum about a metre from her, he rested his aching wrists on his lap. Despite having been badly beaten, his spirit wasn't broken. A little smile etched around his lips. "They can't break you, can they?" His voice was very gentle. "What's your name?" "My friends are coming." Defiance flared into her voice. "They'll kill you and anyone else who gets in their way." Marcus leaned back, his back against the wall, and pulled his knees into himself. "Are they gods? Because only gods could get in here." "Perhaps they're friends of Mekra." His voice dropped into an introspective tone. "He could get in here. Imagine that, a storm of death and ice and madness, blowing through this building and clearing a path out of here. Then maybe both of us could get out." He rested his chin on his knees. "I've tried 3 times to get out. They only don't kill me because they can fix their electronic things. Silly gangsters. So uneducated they can't fix their own machines." His voice degraded into a grumbling mumble, and he stared blankly at the flaking wallpaper in front of him. "If I had a weapon, I'd show them. Evil Arcanan making slaves out of free people. Mekra will come for them." He looked at his bleeding wrists and sighed. "One day." The girl made an odd noise, and it took him a moment to realize she was weeping. "What's wrong?" He tried to comfort her, but didn't want to scare her by getting any closer. "My arm," she wailed. "He broke it. It hurts so bad. I can't think through it to stop the pain." He frowned. "Stop it? How do you stop pain?" "My hands. I'm a healer, but I can't," she sobbed. He lifted his chin from his knees and looked at the mess of hair that covered her face. "Can I help?" "You touch me wrong, I'll kick you in the crotch." Defiance in her voice, even under the sobbing, reassured him that she would indeed fight back, no matter what. "I won't touch you wrong," he said quietly. "Let me help you." Shuffling towards her, he reached and brushed back her light brown hair. When he saw the state of her face, he had to suppress a cry. The one who had beaten her had hit her so badly that nothing was recognizable under bruises, cuts, and swelling. Intelligent, purple-brown eyes looked up at him through the mess. He smiled and quickly wiped a near and tear on his cheek. Hi. "My right arm. It's under me. I can't move it." He shook his head. "If it's broken, it'll hurt." The puffy bottom lip twitched. "I know, but you got it anyway. Don't move it too much. Just out." Swallowing, he put one hand under her shoulder and readied himself to lift her body off her arm. When he did, he tried not to hurt her, but she screamed anyway. He moved her arm out from under her, put her shoulder back on the ground, and skittered off as far away from her as he could get. Her yell degraded into a weeping sob, and he crouched in the corner, covering his head with his arms. I'm sorry. It's okay." Her voice was very small. "It's okay. Just gonna sleep." Scene 30. The ground floor of the casino was huge and virtually heaving with celebrating drunken people. Lights flashed from winning and losing slot machines, and the smoke-filled air obscured the vivid reds and golds of the decor. Talon had to fight to keep his footing as people pushed past him in their inebriated revelry. The purely physical side of the casino was intensely overpowering on its own, but psychically it was even worse. The telepathic noise stabbed like shards of glass into his brain from all of the unshielded minds of patrons. Another person bumped into him, placing a hand on his shoulder as they passed. He flinched from the stab of voices and drunken nausea coming through from their physical contact. The pulse of empathic force in the room was like a wave that ebbed and flowed across the space. It was a hovering mountain etched with patterns of drunkenness, random flares of the emotive peaks and troughs of winning and losing, and smattered chaotically with an underlying tension. It pitched towards different corners of the room, back and forth, like great ocean swells, and the motion added to his already upset stomach. Nathan had disappeared into the crowd again, but as clear as each of the minds in the room were if he concentrated on one at a time, Talon couldn't sense Nathan at all. A hand touched his arm, and he turned to see Nathan right next to him. Talon frowned, wondering how he managed to do that so well. "I found a way through to her," Nathan yelled over the noise. "This way." Tay followed him through the sea of faces and jingling, blinking, gabbling machines to the far right, where an open door led to a corridor and public toilets. It was significantly quieter in the hall, and he almost gasped in abject relief. Nathan walked to one end of the space, but instead of turning around, he leaned against the gold-patterned wallpaper and pushed hard. There was an audible click. The entire wall moved inwards like a door. Talon frowned. "How'd you know about that?" "Luck, you guess." That familiar half-smile and vivid blue eyes flickered at Talon for a moment. Sensing the lie, Talon slipped past the surface of the priest's mind and saw that he'd worked at the casino for a short time. He saw flashes of things he really didn't want to see, and sensed that Nay hadn't wanted to see it either. Tay understood immediately why he was being coy, and nodded. The hall on the other side was fairly wide and quite long. It ended at another gold-patterned wall. The space looked a bit like a hotel corridor, with many doors along one side and plastic pot plants sitting on the off-blue carpet at randomly spaced intervals. There was another click at the other end of the corridor, and a rough-looking man barged in through the gap, glaring as he strode towards them. "You'd better be here for the whores," the dark-haired man bellowed. He was all shoulders, broad and tall, quite strong-looking, with his blue eyes, and his blue eyes were so light they were almost white. Tay stepped forward. "We're looking for a girl, Nalana." "Mine." His thought was practically a bellow. The man's eyes gained a touch of menace, and Tay dived off to the side as the gangster pulled out a weapon. Looking up from the floor, Tay watched as Nathan moved towards the gun and dodged expertly as the gangster fired. He got in close, pulled the weapon from his fingers, and swung him into a headlock in a matter of seconds. As Talon watched, Ayala Spades found himself at the end of his own gun barrel. "Nalana Yen, where is she?" Talon's voice was ice cold, and Nathan's voice was ice cold, and Tay swallowed. The young man was very surprising when he wanted to be. Tay got to his feet and approached them. The gangster was scared, but not so scared he was going to immediately give away the location of his newest acquisition. Talon put a hand on the gangster's arm and dove into his unprotected mind. Fritz cried out in pain. "Where is she?" he demanded telepathically. A location flashed through the man's mind, even as he tried to fight it. Fritz knew about telepaths, but he wasn't in as much control of his own mind as he thought. Talon saw a door. They'd passed it in their short conflict with him. Nalana was behind that door, beaten but still alive in his size-shielded room. Fritz had the door key in the breast pocket of his black suit jacket. Tay pulled the jacket open and grabbed it. "Can you hold him, Nathan?" "Of course. Go and get her." Scene break. Fritz struggled under the firm grip of a man at least 20 years his junior. The older of the two intruders, the telepath, paced immediately to the right door and used his key. And using his key, unlocked it. When the door closed, the grip on Fritz tightened, and he felt an increasing tension in his shoulders and neck. "We are going to take this girl and walk away. You are going to cease hunting her." The boy's voice was commanding and utterly fearless. Fritz grunted in pained amusement. "No, we're going to hunt you two down like rats." "No, Ayala Spades." "Why's that?" he snorted. "You got superpowers too?" "Of a sort." His voice was too calm, and Ayala sensed a snippet of danger in the young man's voice. I'm sure you remember Jaron Mehan, my father. He worked here before he became the head of the agency. Ayala stiffened at the name. If you go anywhere near that girl again, or attempt to take me out, the agency will come down and wipe you all off the face of this planet, and I will personally make your death as slow as humanly possible. Why do you care about one girl? He barked. Pain in his shoulder was getting intolerable, but he wouldn't let Jaron's whelp see any weakness. The same reason you do. She is a resource. My resource. You will let us leave. You will hunt her no more. The boy's voice deepened into a gruff, intimidating whisper as his arm tightened around Fritz's neck. Do you understand me?